My guest today is actor William Baldwin, who has distinguished himself as an actor, producer, writer, and who continues to showcase his multitude of talents in the world of film and television. He has starred in over 80 films and varied genres and over 30 television movies and series. And he made his feature film debut in Oliver Stone's Born on the 4th of July, starring Tom Cruise, who should have won the Oscar that year. And he is best known for his roles in Flatliners and Backdraft. And in '05, he starred with Laura Linney and Jeff Daniels in the critically acclaimed award-winning film The Squid and the Whale, and was recognized on over 200 top 10 lists that year. He also appeared in the hit comedy Forgetting Sarah Marshall with Kristen Bell and Russell Brand, co-starred with William Hurt and Tim Robbins in the independent comedy Noise. But he is here with us today about a very important upcoming film, No Address, a scripted drama about the epidemic of homelessness in our communities, and it stars Patricia Velasquez, Beverly D'Angelo and Ashanti, Xander Berkeley, Ty Pennington, and many others. So let's welcome screen actor William Baldwin to the show. Welcome.
So great to be here. So great to be on the show. Thank you, Ward.
Yes. Well, would you like to go by William or go by Billy?
Well, professionally, I'm William. My friends call me Billy, and you can call me Sir.
Well, that works out very, very well.
Billy, but you could call me Master and Commander. I'm kidding. Call me Billy B.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. Tell us about this brand new upcoming movie, No Address, and why it is so important to take the role of the businessman, Robert.
Well, it's a film that I responded to. You know, you're usually looking to have your cake and eat it. You want a great part, a great script, a great cast, a great director. You want to have the money in the budget to support the project. But, you know, that can be in any genre. That could be thriller, that could be rom-com, that could be drama. This is a sort of, I would say, a faith-adjacent, a social message film that's about a very important issue, the issue, of course, of homelessness. You know, I've been involved. I was away at university many, many years ago. I studied history and political science. I have a degree in political science. I worked briefly on the Hill, and I've served on the board of many, many different political nonprofit organizations, including in the realm or the world of homelessness, dating back to the 1980s. So it's an issue that's very, very important to me. Frustratingly, it seems like we're having the same conversations about it decades later. They've said we're now entering the fourth decade that will be the decade that ends homelessness. So here we are 4 decades, 5 decades later, and we're still having the conversation. But let's start talking about solutions.
Exactly. Now, I want to kind of step back because I had the honor to interview Dr. Robert Marbut, the expert on homelessness and who served under 3 presidential administrations. Now, he told me that you have an interesting story about homelessness as you actually went undercover as a homeless person.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know why he used the word undercover, but I have worked, I was the president of I was on the board for a dozen years, and I served as president of an organization called the Creative Coalition, which is various entertainment industry professionals, right? Both sides of the camera, writers, directors, producers, art direction, set design, anybody can qualify that's in entertainment that wants to use their voice effectively and constructively. And we used to do work in the area of homelessness through the reputation I had built working with that organization. I was asked to work by Maria Cuomo, who is Mario Cuomo's daughter, and Governor Mario Cuomo's daughter, Andrew Cuomo's sister, and married to Kenneth Cole, the shoe designer. They started an organization called Help for the Homeless. I was on their board and worked with them. I was briefly on their board decades ago, and I worked with them for a few years before moving to the West Coast. And then years later, Andrew became Clinton's housing secretary, and he asked me to go on overnighters with him to various shelters in the DC area. I've done that in Boston, New York, and Washington, only in Washington with Secretary Cuomo, but we spent nights. It's sort of like what I did on this film. When I did Born on the 4th of July, I lived in the jungle in a foxhole in the ground in the jungle for 3 weeks before we started shooting. When I did internal affairs, I did ride-alongs with the LAPD for weeks before I did the film. When I did Backdraft, we would rehearse during the day. Actually, we would train in the fire academy during the day, and then we'd break for lunch. In the afternoon, we would go to locations and rehearse scenes and block scenes weeks before. Great luxury of the film. Weeks before we were actually going to shoot there, and then in the evening, I would sleep over the firehouses, and we would go on live calls on these overnight, which we did that for probably 3 weeks as well. So like that, I immersed myself in the research. I did this on No Address for the documentary, for the film, and we went to homeless encampments numerous times, and we went to homeless shelters numerous times. You know, to get it right on screen primarily, but I also like spending time with these people to look them in the eye and to have a conversation with them and to hear their voice and to make sure they're being heard by everybody, by you, Ward, by me, people in Hollywood, people on the federal, state, and local level that are dealing with homelessness, nonprofit activists, NGOs. You know, I want these people I want their voice to be heard, and I would like us to come together and start working on solutions. Some organizations are doing very, very effective work in this area right now. I know that Maria Cuomo told me that because it was easy to create the political capital and the political will to address veteran homelessness. And I'm misspeaking slightly, but I believe she told me that they ended veteran homelessness in this one area on this project she was working with. They ended 75-80% of veteran homelessness in 3 or 4 years. That's very dramatic, and that's highly effective.
Very effective. Well, what type of stories did you hear from people that you met that were homeless?
Uh, you hear, you know, lots of different stories. You hear, just to rattle off a few, you hear stories of, uh, you know, people struggling with their sexual identity and trying to discuss it with their family and being thrown out of their homes. People that age out of the foster care program. People that get out of the military and have PTSD. People that are incarcerated and aren't prepared for the transition for civilian life after incarceration, people with mental health issues, people with drug addiction issues, people that want help, people that don't want help. Most people that don't want help are people that are addicted or have mental health issues. And I will say, and maybe Marbet got into this, but a lot of the drug addiction issues uh, stem from lack of mental health care. A lot of people are medicating themselves because they're not seeing a psychiatrist, they're not seeing a psychologist, they're not getting the proper medication. If they were on the proper medication and they were stabilized, they would never have wound up on the streets in the first place. And because they are, and because they're having so much anxiety, so much stress, so much unhappiness in their life, they're resorting to medicating themselves with street drugs when if they had the proper pharmaceutical and had the proper support systems in place. Look, many of these people, many of them with the proper care can get back on their feet and get back to a normal life. Many of them will require lifelong care. Many of them will never be able to hold down a job and will need support and assistance in some way, shape, or form, whether it's food or food stamps or medication or whatever, for the rest of their lives. I mean, I have family members that have had health issues where some of them uh, got the proper medication, got back in their feet, and they have a job and they live alone and they support themselves, and others that will be required for lifelong treatment. They'll never lead a normal life. But I want to just emphasize, many of these people are coming out of incarceration. Many of these people are coming out of the foster care system. Many of these people are coming out of the military. Many of these people are coming from some sort of mental health crisis in their background, and a lot of those programs were cut decades ago. They were cut in the early '80s, and I don't remember the number, but we used to have probably, I'm making this up, I don't remember. We probably had several 100,000 beds for mental health care. Back in the late 70s, we probably had several 100,000, and maybe we have, there's certainly less than 50,000. There may be 35,000 in the country. So that's one way we have to go after it. Look, if you give, it's not give them the famous line, biblical, don't give them a fish, teach them how to fish, right? You can tell me what the line is for the Bible, Lord, but teach them how to fish. But if you could provide this for a homeless person and for anybody who's struggling, if you can provide education, health care, fair wages, job training, job placement, and a livable wage, the rest of it will take care of itself. That sounds complicated, but it's not as complicated as you think. If you can get them the proper education, the proper health care, a livable wage, and affordable housing. I mean, when I was at the facility in outside of Auburn, I was sitting there with people for hours, and this woman sat down next to me, and we were having a great chat, and she was tying up her Carhartt boots, and I said, "Where are you going? We going for a hike?" And she goes, "No, I'm going to work. I work at the Home Depot." I said, "Oh, that's interesting. That's a great company. I know Ken Langone, who launched that company." I said, "So you're working at Home Depot and you're living here in a shelter?" She said, "Yeah, I can't afford the housing. I live in California right now. There's a problem with affordable housing because interest rates are so high. There's not a lot of inventory for rent. The prices have gone up on rent. This woman has a full-time job working at Home Depot, and she can't afford to rent a place in Auburn, which is about 30 minutes north of Sacramento, which is, if you work at Home Depot, you should be able to afford rent. And right now the economy's out of work. I know the president and his administration are working on addressing those issues."
Yeah, even California has closed many of their mental health hospitals, most likely due to budget cuts. And I was talking to Jennifer Stolo, who is the CEO of Robert Craig Films, who is bringing out this incredible film called No Address. And around the country, there's about, I think, maybe 35 specialized campuses that house multiple departments to help the homeless, from those that are addicted to drugs, those that are out of work or need shelter. And we need to see more of these coming across the country, because it seems at the moment, and it's been this way for decades, that local governments in many major metropolitan cities, they're just throwing money at the homeless crisis, but money is not going to solve this problem. Why is that?
Well, I don't really know the answer to that. I know that, to get proper mental health care is going to cost money, and to spend that money effectively and efficiently and wisely, to eliminate the waste, like we have in the Defense Department, right? I mean, you eliminate the waste and you eliminate the fraud. You could probably reduce the budget of the Defense Department by 20% without there being a single threat to national security. You just have to learn how to spend that money more effectively, more efficiently, eliminate the waste, eliminate the fraud, eliminate the programs that exist that aren't working or obsolete or that we don't really need. It's a weird analogy to compare it to that, but there is again, we're having the same conversation 40 years later, going on 50 years later, and something has to be done about it. If you look at the spike of homelessness during COVID, homelessness in LA County went from 52,000 to 76,000. Some people will say that's illegal immigration. I'm sure a portion of that is. But in Santa Barbara, when I was driving up and down the 101, at the Bath Street exit, there's a spot off the 101 next to the DMV where there were 3 or 4 tents, and there were mothers and fathers in a tent with their 3 or 4 children, and they were out throwing a frisbee, and they were out kicking a soccer ball around. And these were white middle-class families that were displaced during COVID because they lost their jobs and they were living check to check, month to month. And you had white middle class and lower middle class families that were living on the side of the 101 in Santa Barbara. That had never happened before COVID. That had never existed before COVID. So it's a little bit of a new animal now. After COVID, is the problem getting worse? Yes. Is the border issue making it worse? For sure. Does the border issue have to be dealt with? Absolutely. I'm hoping that they'll come together in a bipartisan way to address that problem. But
Well, I learned that there's 1.2 million homeless adults in America. There's 1.5 million homeless children in America. 40% of the people who are homeless became homeless after the age of 50, which is really kind of tells the sign of an economic displacement, and basically depending on where they're actually living, if it's California, New York, or Texas. But and then you also had brought up mental illness, which is used as the poster child for homelessness, with about 75% of the homeless with untreated mental illness. And it's become a crisis across the country. How are we going to have you talked to anyone? Because you brought it up too. We have a very big economic displacement. Many people who are homeless, they still go to work, but they can't afford housing. And I know that's a big problem in California and a big problem in New York, and is becoming a big problem in certain parts of mid-America. What can we do about that?
Well, I think it's you can have a very, very very impressive results very quickly if the political will was there, if there were the political capital there on both sides of the aisle. In general, Republicans feel like, and I don't want this to be an attack on anybody, I'm sure Democrats feel this way too, don't want to throw money at it inefficiently, ineffectively, irresponsibly. They don't think, or quite frankly, they don't want to. They're challenging the funding aspect of this. Democrats are like, not in my backyard. So let's do this, but let's go do that on the other side of the railroad tracks. I don't want it to affect the value of my real estate. I don't want dangerous people near the elementary school where my kids go to school. So we have to figure out a way to address this issue, because when I was at the Gathering Inn, where Jennifer's husband is the director of the Gathering Inn, it was people in that area were wondering, where did all the homeless people go? And they were in an industrial park. They had a complex in an industrial park, and one part of it was for women, one part of it was for men, one part of it was for families, one part of it was for people that had committed to sobriety and go clean and sober. Another one was providing food and shelter for people that weren't quite ready to make that commitment, but they were providing food and shelter in another area of the space so that they weren't in the streets in danger and exposed to the elements and possibly getting in trouble. And they would graduate into the program that they were working on them and helping them achieve their sobriety. A lot of people think that it was their choice to do the drugs, but a lot of times it's a mental health issue, and they're trying to medicate themselves because they have no other way of dealing with the mental health issue that they're struggling with. I lived that personally with several close friends and family members. But I think that, when you're talking about people not leaving the prison system, that were incarcerated, that aren't being prepared for life on the outside again, their transition back to civilization. When you're talking about kids that are aging out of the foster care program, when you're talking about PTSD veterans, when you're talking about children and families that are homeless, we have to come up with a solution. And I think that what Marbet is talking about is the answer. The political will is the biggest problem, and dealing with the mental health component of it, which is going to cost money. And if you want to know ways in which we can put it this way: if we don't address it, it's going to cost us more money. It's going to be cheaper to address it than not to address it. a lot of these people, quite frankly, are in jail. They don't need to be in jail. They need to be getting, they need to be in a homeless facility getting mental health care, and they're not getting the care that they need while they're incarcerated. So if we give these people the care that they need, I don't know the numbers. I'm not an expert in that area, but I'm told by experts that if you, it's going to cost more to not help them than to help them. And I am sure, as we all know, with all, again, all of the waste and all of the fraud and all of the pork, there's a way to go in and trim the budget and find the money to address this as a healthcare crisis. This is a healthcare crisis that's going to cause more problems for material things like real estate value, crime, health, welfare, and safety of our you know of citizens. And quite frankly, these people need to be uh, tended to, and they need to be taken care of. Uh,
Well, you
it's
brought
just
up,
sad. I mean,
yeah, but you bring up some very important points because let's say those in prison, they're getting close to their release date. There needs to be programs in the prison setting to prepare them for life on the outside. And it's going to be different for someone who's maybe been in prison for a year or two. But it's going to be very different for someone who's been in prison for 5, 10, 15 years when they're coming out and it's all going to depend. Did they get any type of education in
well,
prison?
a lot of people that should be in homeless shelters are being put in prison, and they're not being treated for their release back into society. They got put into prison because they committed a crime and they were homeless and they were desperate. Then they get incarcerated. They probably feel better and safer being incarcerated than being exposed on the streets. Then they get released and they haven't been prepared for life back on the streets again. And then the cycle starts again. I, I used to work on the Hill for a congressman from Long Island, and he worked on the Welfare Reform Act of, I don't know, I worked for him during Reagan's second term, maybe the end of Reagan's first term, second term, 85-ish, 86. And that bill was designed not to create a continued cycle of dependency. It was to take a person on social services, get them the proper support, get them an education, job training, vocation, job placement. And the whole program was designed to get them off of welfare, not to keep them dependent on welfare. That's how we should be dealing with the homeless crisis, except for a very marked percentage of people that are going you're not going to get them out of the system. They're going to require a lifetime of care because they are permanently mentally ill, and they will never be able to hold a job and support themselves, and they may be a hazard to themselves and others. Probably a small percentage, but I don't know what the number is. It could be 10%, it could be 25%. But there's a whole lot of people out there that if you modeled it after the welfare reform and you got them the mental health care they needed, they required. You got them the medication they required, and then you help them with education, vocation, job placements, follow through to get for the program designed to get them back on their feet to make them self sufficient and walking on their own 2 feet. I would be very interested to see what the statistics were on those people that were put through a comprehensive and not a cheap program. But again, the cost to have them on the streets affecting real estate prices. This sounds very insensitive, but affecting real estate prices or you know um,
Well, I learned I
crime
learned
rate,
from
crime rates, or showing up in the emergency room without insurance, and the cost and the impact on the healthcare system, or being incarcerated and the cost to incarcerate them. It's more expensive to not treat it than it is to treat it. And the compassionate humanitarian side of all of us says, Republicans and Democrats says, let's help these people. Let's help these people. The question is, how do we do it? Do both sides have the will to say, if you fund the mental health care component of it only, and get them the care they deserve and they require on the from the mental health aspects of their life, and get them the treatment and the medication, and you do that only for foster care children, that are aging out, and only for PTSD veterans or all veterans, and all for people that are transitioning out of incarceration. That alone could drop the homeless rate very dramatically, very significantly. We're talking dropping homelessness, you know, 50, 60% in 3, 4, 5 years. And another thing is, you look in California, LA just went from 52,000 to 76,000 during COVID. San Francisco is not as bad, but it's bad. Sacramento has gone from, I don't know, 2,000 to 15,000 in the last 5 to 10 years. It's gotten really bad in Sacramento. But that's not really the problem. The problem is the 1,000 counties across America in red states and blue states that live in suburban and rural areas. Of course, they congregate and they flock to warmer urban areas like the West Coast. You have a huge problem in Chicago. You have a huge problem in New York. You have a problem in Baltimore. You have a problem in Boston. But in between, in the suburban and rural areas, you have these counties that have 600 homeless, 800 homeless, 1,200 homeless, 1,500 homeless. You give the care in those areas, you can eradicate homelessness in those counties and in those states 80% in 5 years.
Well, yeah, because
Very
even
dramatically.
Dr. Marbut is the one that created the program that is being used in San Antonio, Texas. And I believe that their success rate is well over 60%. And then you take San Francisco, which spends upwards to $250,000 a day to clean up after the homeless, which equates to well over $60 million a year. So there's money there that can at least start putting a dent in this problem. But all the points you make are absolutely correct. And
Marvin's program, I don't remember how many people are there. I could be way off. I think there's 2,500 people there. Am I wrong?
no, I
Did he
think
tell you that?
I think you're right in the ballpark with that, because his program is such a great success in San Antonio. It's the program that needs to be put forth at the federal level
It's
for
the
all
model.
states.
It's the model. Yeah,
It's
I
the
mean, and
model.
San Antonio it's a big city, but it's not Dallas and it's not Houston and it's not Miami and it's not New Orleans, and they're doing really, really, really God's work, in San Antonio, and getting these people the right. They're not throwing money at it recklessly and irresponsibly. They're throwing money designed to make these people
Self-sufficient.
efficient, self-sufficient, and it's designed to get them out of the system, back on their feet, back with a job, back with a livable wage, back with affordable housing. And it's wild that we live in a world where you can have a job at a top company like Home Depot. But you've heard it before. You've heard it with Walmart. I mean, people working for Walmart are working there full time, and they're working a second job, and they're still collecting food stamps because they have 3 or 4 kids, and they the job that they have is not enough. We have to live in a world where if you're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, that should be enough to to pay your rent, pay your utilities, and feed your children. Something's out of balance.
Well, yeah, I mean now, and I've talked to many about this problem too. We're starting to see these these RVs parked end to end on the side of the road. Some of these can be as long as a mile. These people, yes, they have shelter, but the problem is that they can't afford an apartment. They go to work at Walmart. They go to work at Home Depot every day. They're putting in their time, but they still don't earn enough to actually buy or get a roof over their head and ditch the RV. So those people in America are classified as homeless. And, Dr. Marbut has built the model that needs to be followed by everyone. The answer
Yeah, it needs
is
to be
right in front of
replicated.
us. Yeah, it takes
Hmm.
effort.
Hmm. Yeah, Marbut it was Trump's homeless czar, and he worked on the federal, state, and local level in government dealing with homelessness for various administrations. I think he even went all the way back to George Jr. And we
Yeah.
could not
George
be
Sr., I believe. Well, no, you're right. George Jr., yes.
William Evan Jr. And we could not be more opposite ends of the political spectrum. We fight and disagree on almost everything, and you should see us together talking about our friendship together and discussing this issue and many other things. We've battled over everything from not homelessness, but we battled about a lot of social and political issues and battled over the Olympics. Believe it or not, I was involved with a committee that was able to reinstate wrestling as an Olympic sport. They were purged from the Olympics in 2012, and they were trying to shrink the core from 26 sports to 25. And wrestling, can you imagine, one of the founding sports of the Olympics, was thrown out temporarily. And he was on the board of the Federation for the modern pentathlon. And we found out behind the scenes that it was modern pentathlon that to save their future, to secure their future as part of the Olympic core, was the ones that were, it was modern pentathlon that was the ones that were responsible for squeezing wrestling out of the Olympics. So he and I have gone to war over that. Happy to say that even though we're on opposite ends of the spectrum on a whole lot of things, we love and adore each other, and we are working very diligently. And it's nice to see in this world where everyone's at each other, on opposite ends of the spectrum and pointing the finger and accusing everybody. And there's all this political tribalism and aggression, and I'm guilty of it myself. I mean, I'll get on my Twitter account and say, "You did this and you said that," and I do it myself. But it's nice to see where two people who differ in many ways ideologically come together in a very civil way and are willing to work together to have a meaningful impact on an important social issue.
Well, yeah, because when I talked to Robert, he was highly complimentary of you, and he even brought up both of you. You have this endearing friendship, and it's really a perfect example, ladies and gentlemen, that we can be polar opposites with people that we know, but we can love, adore, and respect one another, and we can agree to disagree without going at each other's throats and shunning each other. But again, Billy, Robert is a great friend of yours. Spoke highly of you. He even laughed about some of the conversations that you and he have had to go round and round. But at the end of the day, you remain friends, and I think that's something that we can all learn from.
In the end of the day, he realized I was right, and he caved. And he says, "I surrender." No, I'm only kidding. Yeah, we have a very, very good friendship. I got to be honest with you. I'd love to take, if anybody's listening out there, I'd love to take it on the road like they did on the bus when they did the documentary. That was never intended to be a documentary. That was research and preparation for the film. And they went to 20 cities in 18 states over 3 weeks, 250 plus interviews. That was the research, so we can make sure everything on screen was authentic and real. And it resulted in this documentary and this study guide. I would love to put cameras and lights on this bus again and go across the country with Marbit and go to urban, suburban, and rural America and go into a coffee shop in Wyoming and in Nebraska and in Colorado and sit down with Marbit and other people and have conversations. Because I have to tell you, a lot of times I've been on Twitter a couple times where I don't follow this person, they follow me. I've never commented on their posts, they comment on my posts. And they comment aggressively, and it got escalated, and it started to get a little bit, uncomfortable. And I followed the person back, and that's the only way you can DM each other, is if you follow each other, right? So I followed him back, and I said, "Hey, it's Billy. This is my phone number. Call me." They're like, "Get out of here. This isn't your phone number. It's like your publicist." I said, "No, call the number. It's me. I'm waiting by the phone. I want to talk to you." And they called me, and this guy's like a country and western guy from outside of Omaha. He's like a rancher and a farmer, and he plays guitar. And literally 2 or 3 conversations later, we were very good friends. We, met in the middle. In the old days, when I worked on the Hill, when Bob Dole and Tip O'Neill went into a room, they closed the door, they locked the door, they opened a bottle of brandy, Tip torched a cigar and said, "You're not going to get this and you're not going to get that. I'll settle on this. I'll compromise on that." And Dole did the same thing, and they hammered out a compromise. And we just don't live in that world anymore.
I would pay to see you and Robert on the bus going into all of these, go into the rural areas, go into the cities, go into the suburbs, have these conversations, because it's these types of conversations that we all need to have, to sit down and at least take the time to listen and process the information. Because I, for one, get so sick and tired of social media. It's so lopsided that everybody feels that they can be an armchair pundit and say whatever they want, regardless if they have any facts or not. But at least you know
Yeah.
what's going on. Robert knows what's going on. And this is something I think you need to bring it up to Robert, Craig, and Jennifer, and get that bus gassed up, because I think that's going to be another No Address series that needs to be filmed.
Yeah, I think what's important is to have a civilized discourse, to disagree. But what's happened with these people that I've had my discussion, I've given my phone number away to like a half a dozen people. And the great part of it is that they were sitting there arguing, and I'm like, dude, we're not arguing. We don't even disagree. Answer these 10 questions. And they said yes and checked off yes to all 10 questions I asked them. And I'm like, do you understand that we agree on 75, 80% of this issue, and we're arguing like we don't agree at all? Now, there's a couple of areas on this topic, whatever the topic is, that we may never agree. And we may never have 100% overlap and total consensus. But we argue like we don't agree on this topic at all. And you agree with me, and I agree with you. The overlap is well beyond 75%. What you need is like a truth Supreme Court. You need a statistical and factual Supreme Court, because I'll throw out something that they'll challenge, or they'll throw out something that I'll challenge, and then I need somebody to say, "Billy, you're wrong." That like Snopes. Snopes will say, "This is not true. 100% not true. This is 100% true. This is partially true. Let me explain to you the parts that are true and not true." Because I have conversations with people, and they first of all, they think we don't agree on the topic, and we agree on a lot of it. But then they start throwing stuff at me that is not historically accurate. It's not, and I'm not even talking about conspiracy theory stuff like, the Holocaust never existed kind of stuff. I'm not talking about that type of thing.
Yeah.
But you can get into arguments with people on this issue, on homelessness, and they don't understand how big the component of the mental health crisis is. And all we want to do is give everybody a shot at the American dream. And when you're talking about those five, education, healthcare, uh, job training, job placement, livable wages, and affordable housing, that's six things. That's something that we should all be entitled to. And if you give um, people that suffer from homelessness, that are also suffering from mental illness, that are treatable, you could really knock a significant number off the homeless rolls if we have the proper programming and you give us
Well, yeah,
the
because
time. And it's
Robert,
not going to
yeah,
happen overnight, but it can happen very, very effectively and very quickly.
yeah, because Marbot is the author of the No Address Interactive Study Guide,
Hmm.
which anybody can access. You can go on Amazon.com, look it up. Organizations, faith-based organizations can get a hold of this interactive guide, because he wrote it and lays out the plan on what to do, what not to do, and how to implement. So the program is out there. I think we just need more, well, like they say, we just need more boots on the ground that are willing to go out there and be empathetic and to lend a helping hand.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the work has been done in the faith by faith organizations. I mean, Marbot has all that history about when all of these organizations were founded, the Red Cross, and some of these organizations that were founded after the Civil War, when veterans were coming home. Same problems. Veterans were coming home with PTSD. They couldn't adapt to back into normal family life, into society, after what they had seen and what they had experienced. They started drinking heavily. they became displaced and became homeless. And all of these organizations were formed in the 1870s, all the way through the early 20th century, the 1905, 1908. And they were heavily backed by nonprofit organizations and faith-based organizations. I would suggest that anybody in a book club and anybody in a Bible study take a break and work on the study guide and figure out how you can go back into your nonprofit community and into your faith community in your church, regardless of your denomination, and look at what the study guide what you'll glean, what you'll learn from the study guide, and how you in your community, in your faith group, can go back and utilize that and have a significant impact. Because this is going to require government involvement on a higher level, on the state, federal, and local level. But the most of it is boots on the ground with nonprofits and faith organizations. They're going to get a lot of this work done.
Well, let me ask you this about your role as the character Robert in the film No Address. I know that you had visited so many of these homeless encampments. You were getting, doing your homework to create this character. Tell us about the character Robert. What is he going through?
Robert is at the end of his rope. Basically, it's kind of like if you've ever seen the film that Charlie Sheen did, that Oliver Stone directed, called Wall Street. There was a very famous actor who was a little long in the tooth for Wall Street, the famous actor Hal Holbrook, and he was warning Bud Fox, the Charlie Sheen character, about the ethics and morals of how to work on Wall Street and meet the standards of the SEC and so on and so forth. And my character is in a very desperate situation. Married, I have a child, I still have my home, I have debt piling up, I'm behind on my mortgage, and I basically am given a warning by my boss that this one last project that I'm working on is the end of the line. If it doesn't come through, then I'm going to get fired. If I get fired, I have options. I probably can, obviously, of course, get another job. I can borrow money. If I lose my home, I can go, crash on somebody's basement with my wife and kid until I get back on my feet. Lo and behold, this piece of land that I'm trying to acquire is a homeless encampment. And I want the homeless encampment cleared to build a multi-purpose residential and commercial space, one of those condo high rises that have retail on the ground level. And I think I'm going to be able to push it through the local board of supervisors, and I think I'm going to be able to get this encampment cleared so we can so I can acquire the property and we can break ground and start construction. And my journey is through the journey of the failure to do so, and then the journey of the way the planets align against me and conspire against me, and result in my wife and my child and I becoming homeless and residing with members of that encampment and living in that encampment. So it's a very interesting journey. The producers and the directors and I said we have to be very careful, because someone doesn't go from being a high-flying commercial real estate dealer who lives in a home with his wife and child to being in his homeless encampment overnight. So let's make sure we address the arc of that progression of that storyline responsibly. The same thing happened to me in Backdraft. I had a conversation with Ron Howard. I said, "You have me quitting after the first fire." I said, "Nobody's going to care about my character. If I quit out because my brother picked on me, Kurt Russell, whatever his name was, Stephen McCaffrey was his character's name, was picking on his little brother Brian, and I quit after the first fire." I said, "No one's going to care about me at all. I'm such a wimp. I quit on the first day." And he said, I'm sort of paraphrasing Ron. He's like, "I don't know if I just said it," or he said, "What do you propose?" And I said, "Every day we're shooting, we should trail a montage sequence. So if we can finish the end of the day at the call sheet and get done 15 or 20 minutes before call time, have them set and standing by, and we'll know what the standby montage sequence scenario is, and we can just run out there like a SWAT team, and we can do it." So what they had me do is I finished the first fire. My brother's on my case. I get in his face. I'm having false recollection of what really happened. Steve gets on Brian. I get in his face. I tell him to get lost. You cut to the montage sequence, which creates the impression that I've toughed it out for 3 or 4 months, 6 months. I've gone out on 100 calls or whatever, 20 calls. And then the second real fire, when my brother comes down on me, like, I can't take it anymore. I quit. And then Kurt looks at me. Steven's like, "Good, good, go quit. That's exactly what Dad would want you to do. He'd want you to quit, you quitter." But we put this montage sequence in the end, in the middle, with some beautiful scenarios in it. There's a great scenario where, if you've ever seen the movie Backdraft, there's one famous piece that we put in there where they arrive at a fire, and the fire hydrant is blocked by a Mercedes Benz, and instead of running the hose under the car or going over the roof of the car, they take the hydrant wrench and they smash out the window because he's blocking the hydrant, and they smash out the window on the other side, and they run the hose through, and they hook up the line, and they put out the fire, and then they cut to another close up of the hose. I forget what you call when you, darn it, all you firemen are so upset with me right now. But the bracket or whatever that locks the hose together, and it's fizzing water. It's like leaking. So in the middle of the Mercedes Benz, we've broken out both of at the bracket that you lock the hose, two pieces of the hose together. It's like going inside the car and filling the car with water. So we had a couple of really good moments, and that's what they had to do, and that's what we have to do in this film, is create and let it breathe enough so that I could go from someone who on the outside appears like a high-flying commercial real estate agent who's really actually in a highly desperate situation and is, a couple of paychecks away from losing his home. He's already behind on his mortgage. And that's partially why we went back and we did some additional photography, was to address that part of the storyline.
Yeah, I understood that you had to go back and do some pickup shots because there were gaps in the editing room, and then to really just bring it all together. And of course, that was delayed by the actor strike.
Yeah, the writer's strike and the actor's strike also prevented us from doing that. But you always cut that together, and the blessing of the strike was it gave us an opportunity to come back and do some to address. In other words, the editors had the whole strike to sit there in the editing room and look at it over and over again and say, that doesn't work, and here's why, and what can we do about it? They didn't have 10 days or 2 weeks to do that. They had 10 months. So it gave them the opportunity to figure out exactly what we needed, go back to the director and writer, Julia Verdon, and have her start, cranking out the pages. And we went back and we shot for about 6 additional shooting days, which is a lot. We probably shot 20, 25 pages or something to add some stuff and to address some holes, as you had said.
Well, what do you hope that the public, when the public finally sees the film No Address, how will it inspire the communities to be more empathetic to the human side of this situation?
We all suffer from this. We go to an event, a political rally, we hear a great speaker that inspires you and motivates you. You go to an event for a charity and you watch the video and you hear the speeches and all the award winners for the people that are rolling up their sleeves and getting their hands dirty. They're down in the trenches doing the work that we can't afford to do. We're doctors, lawyers, teachers, iron workers. We have bills to pay. We have children to raise. And you get really inspired and motivated by this, and then that dissipates, and then you go back into your life. And I'm hoping that this motivates and inspires people to not look away, to not walk by. I have made it a practice of mine, and this is not what I'm suggesting people should do only, but I made it a practice of mine. If I'm walking down the street alone, regardless of who it is, sometimes if I'm walking down the street with my children and there's someone having some sort of mental health episode on the street, I'll, just walk by. But usually, with or without my children, I stop. It happened to me. Where was I? It happened to me yesterday on Cannon Drive in Beverly Hills. There was a homeless guy standing outside of the parking structure that I came out of, and he was from Russia, and he had been here for a year, and his English wasn't very good, so we were having difficulty understanding each other. But I sat with him for a half an hour, and I had a conversation with him, and literally to walk by somebody and look them in the eye and say good morning and say hello and say how's your day going and say, how can I help you? Obviously, throwing money at the problem that may lead to drug use or alcohol consumption is not the answer. Or, buying them a meal is a great thing. I think Marbet would tell you that kind of help may not help.
Yeah.
It's hard to walk by. For me, it's hard to walk by. Sometimes I'll say, "Hey, I'm going to get a sandwich. Can I get you a sandwich? Would you like something to eat? I'm going to get a hamburger. Can I get you a hamburger or whatever? Can I get you something to eat?" And they'll very respectfully say yes. But it's obviously a much more highly complicated problem than that. And I hope people see the film and look at the study guide and see the documentary, and they're motivated and they're inspired to not look away, to not walk by, to not let go, to take action and to immerse themselves and get their hands dirty. Roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty in your local church, in the nonprofit, in the local mission. And it's more than doing what I'm guilty of, going to the mission on Thanksgiving Day and serving Thanksgiving dinner and then saying, I've done my duty. It's a lot more than that. They need a lot more than that. They need people to care, and they need people to pressure elected officials to have the political will to address the healthcare component, because this is a homeless crisis, but really it's not. It's a mental health crisis that we have in this country, and we could eradicate 80% of it in 5 years if people want to do it.
Yeah, and I
I'm
mean,
in.
yeah, and a lot of people need to realize today that millions of people across this country are just one paycheck away from being homeless. And so,
Mhm.
it's a very difficult situation to look at it at this time. It's difficult to try to find the solutions, but the solutions, they're there. We just need to have the right people in place to implement a lot of these programs that Dr. Marbut has put forth, who has an extremely successful track record in this area. He is considered the foremost expert in the areas of homelessness, and hopefully that the rest of Washington D.C. and the states and the local levels will understand that there are things that can be done. And you've brought up some very, very important points. And ladies and gentlemen, to get involved now, head over to noaddressmovie.com. The interactive study guide is available on Amazon.com. And there are so many things to learn. So when you go to noaddressmovie.com, you're going to learn what we've been talking about here today, because we need more people to get involved. We need a rise in empathy in this country, because look, regardless of economic situations, we're all the same. Our blood's the same color, regardless of what we look like on the outside. And we need to take care of one another. And like Billy has said, if the programs are put in place within 5 years, we could, eradicate 80% of the homeless crisis in
There,
America. Go ahead, Billy.
there's 1.3 million adults and 1.5 million children in a country of 350 million people. That's a lot of people, but that you could really, really address a significant portion of this. And you're talking about 1.5 million children. What did they ever do to deserve this? What if we just focus? If you focus on the mental health component? Okay, kids aging out of foster care, PTSD vets, and homeless children alone. Let's agree that if someone, you say it's not mental health, it's a drug problem, they made this choice, they don't want my help. Okay, so forget about that right now. Let's deal with people and forget people coming out of incarceration. They made their bed, let them lie in it, okay? Let's address people coming out of foster care, PTSD vets, and 1.5 million children that didn't do anything to deserve this. If you took care of the one, and of course many of them probably don't have a mental health component. They just are living with, they just run out of options. They're living with parents that have mental health problems, or they've come to the end of the road, and this is their life. Do you think this is where they want to be? Do you think this is where they want to be? 1.5 million children in a country of 350 million people. Watch the movie. I hope it inspires you. I hope it motivates you. I hope it widens the bandwidth of America's consciousness and empathy so that we can tackle this together, like Marvin and I. Couldn't be more polar opposites, couldn't be. And we are partners in crime in trying to address this issue. We are Carvel and Madeline addressing homelessness.
That's it. Well, I'm going to ask you, you have 5 films in post-production that you are starring in. What else do you have planned for this year?
Well, to be honest with you, I did a show for Netflix in 2018 that I starred in and I produced and I helped to create. And the next year, I think maybe China has spoken to you about this, but our son was ill in 2019. So we both took the year off when our son was ill. And then COVID hit in 20 and 21. And then I worked like a banshee in 22. And then we had the writers and actors strike in 23. So 4 out of the last 5 years, you're a cop, a teacher, a fireman, you got a paycheck every Friday through all of that. When our son was sick, we didn't work. When we had COVID, there was no Wilson Phillips concerts. When the strike hit, there was no work for either one of us. So I'm very excited, very anxious. The Willy Wonka golden ticket for me would be like I had on the show I did with Jill Clayburgh and Donald Sutherland. It was an ABC comedy called Dirty Sexy Money. Really funny, really cutting edge. It was kind of like Arrested Development. And we got canceled in the last writer's strike in 2007, and then the collapse of the economic collapse of 2008 led to our cancellation. But the Willy Wonka golden ticket is a very cutting edge part with great writing, with a cool cast. I don't care where it is at this point. I'll do it in Atlanta, New York, Toronto, Vancouver, LA. Who knows? I'll do it anywhere. But to be on an ensemble show where you're not doing like CSI, where you're Caruso, number 1 on the call sheet, and you're working in almost every scene every day, that's exhausting. But if you're in an ensemble and there's multiple A storylines in any given episode, so you're out of 8 or 9 shooting days, you're working 5 or 6. I'm not afraid to work, but I need time off to. When I'm not working, I'm working. When I have my days off, I'm rehearsing and preparing for the next day. So the Willy Wonka Golden Ticket is that TV series, a cool part in a great series, and I don't know when it'll come next. Every once in a while, as you said in my introduction, I get, Gossip Girl, I get the Squid and the Whale, I get Dirty Sexy Money, I get Northern Rescue, I get Forgetting Sarah Marshall. So I don't know what the next one is, but I'm hoping it's pretty close around the bend. I'm hoping it's right around the corner. We'll see.
Yeah, well, ladies and gentlemen, the movie No Address is about a group of people that are experiencing homelessness and realize that they must bond together as a family if they're going to survive. They all have no address, but earlier in life, they did. And the day-to-day struggle on the streets is emotionally charged with uncertainty at every corner. Shelter, food, and ongoing safety threatens their daily life as each one of them has arrived on the streets through unexpected circumstances. Now, while meeting a few gracious advocates along their journey, the family finds a refreshing new hope to live and get their lives back. So I want to thank you, Billy, for sharing not only the movie, but also your great insights into this crisis in America right now.
Thank you so much for having me, Ward. I look forward to seeing you again coming on the show.
Hey, absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, remember, and really remember this, homelessness can happen to anyone, even you and even I. And again, head over to noaddressmovie.com to learn more. And as for me, I'll see you next time.